Welcome back, YouTubers. This is Liking the Covers. Back with another video. This is the series of In the Book. Welcome once again as we look inside a classic Bronze Age book. Today's pick is going to be the Fantastic Four, issue 192 from March 1978. So it starts out opening the book to a rather sad looking Johnny Storm coming into the airport. And he's just, as the thought balloons are there, he is really just, he's down and he feels alone and no friends. He doesn't have Ben around, he doesn't have Sue or Reed or Franklin. But when he comes there, there's children there to greet him and an old friend of Johnny's and of the team. And he calls out to Johnny, his Wyatt Wingfoot. He was introduced by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby when they were doing their run on Fantastic Four. And I think he was also, I don't remember exactly when he was featured, but I know that he was featured in different issues. But this was the third one I picked up. And when I picked this up, I was introduced to Mr. Wingfoot for the first time. So Johnny puts on a display for the children. And this is one of the times I've seen the Human Torch do one of the replicates, a replica of himself, and has the replica go through flame rings and just, you know, kind of just showing off his flame to the young kids. Then there's an observer on the side who is very interested in what, you know, he's doing. So they cut away and it's Alicia and Ben, and they are there discussing different things, and there's a knock at the door, and Alicia brings in a package. And when they examine it, they find a ticking noise. And right away, Ben grabs the away from Alicia, runs off with it, and says to get behind him. He's thinking that it might be one of the hundreds of enemies that the Fantastic Four has. But when he opens it, he finds a watch. And he finds out it's from the Yancey Street gang, who has made Ben one of their own ever since like the beginning of this comic. Then we cut back to Johnny meeting the person who is going to be racing against him in the drag race. And this is the first introduction that I ever seen, Rebecca Rainbow. And she's a good friend of Wyatt Wingfoot. So they meet, and she almost runs Johnny over. But she was saying that she wanted to see how good his reflexes were. And like he says, he's he's you know, he's never been you know, ran over by a female in Ferrari. So I've never even had that pleasure. And then he meets Thaddeus Longhorn, or Thaddeus P. Longhorn, the mayor of the fine city and organizer of the Data County drag race. So they have an introduction. Then Johnny cannot, isn't able to sleep. So he's restless and he is thinking back to his family and his friends. And it cuts away to this mysterious villain that's in this book. And he's discussing things with the people that hired him. Then they cut away to Sue and Reed. Reed is looking for a job. And he gets an offer for a job for a starting salary of $20,000 per week. Dun, dun, dun. Suspicion. So there we go with the race. And it's basically Johnny and Rainbow going up against each other. And the flag drops. They're off. And they are leading the pack. Now, as they are leading the pack, into the story comes the villain of the story. At first, when they come upon a twister, both Rainbow and Johnny are put up, their cars and them are up into the twister. Rainbow is thrown clear and thrown out of the twister. She goes to fall. Out comes Johnny with his flame on. He grabs her and he says he wants her to stay loose. He don't want to snap her spine. And she says, "Hotshot, I may not like your driving, but I got to appreciate your timing." So when he brings her down to the ground, he finds out it's the Texas Twister. And the Texas Twister was one of those that, when the Frightful Four was in the issue 177 of the Fantastic Four, he was trying to get into the Frightful Four at the time. But I don't even know what happened to him. He hasn't been around for a while, as far as I know. If anybody knows what's happened to his character, I would like to be, you could tell me down in the comments if you like. But as it goes on, after we get past all this, it's kind of like a one-on-one Human Torch against Texas Twister. And he gets, when they initially start out, he gets Johnny and kind of like knocks Johnny to the ground. And then Johnny gets the idea to hurdle asphalt at the Texas Twister. But that backfires and it comes down on the crowd and they got to run and get out of the way. So he goes to the air and there is a sandstorm and he uses the sand, turns it in, melts the sand to glass, and then he breaks it apart and then, yeah. And then he says that, "You 10-gallon troublemaker, I'm coming for you." And then he finds out he's gone. And he's back on the ground. And he uses two twisters to come at Johnny, snuff out his flame, and then he proceeds to knock Johnny out with just one punch. Then Rainbow, she realizes Johnny's been taken out. She runs to find Wyatt, Wingfoot, and Wyatt and Rainbow come to the aid of Johnny. And the truck that they're in has got gasoline. I think there's like 100 gallons of gasoline in the back of this truck. So she proceeds to try to get the Texas Twister with it. And when it hits the Twister, it explodes. And he's stunned, but he's not out of it by no means. But Wyatt gets a punch off on him, and it does kind of stagger him, but he still comes at him with one of those twister things he uses. Johnny wants him to not be a part of this because he's too powerful, Texas Twister is. But then he says that he's thinking that explosion took more out of him than he wants to let on. And he says, "And how about it, cowboy? Are you getting tired?" He says, "Still kicking, huh, young fella? Well, if you want me, come and get me." And he says, "Not this time. Doesn't hiding in tornadoes get tiresome, Tex?" And then the Torch is thinking he's trying to goad me into following him inside his cyclone. Guess nobody ever told him the Human Torch doesn't fall for the same trick twice. So they proceed to go at it, and he does get him to the ground. I mean, as you can tell in there, I mean, he is like put down to the ground, like he's like a rock, and into the ground. But Texas Twister decides to give up, and he proceeds to leave. And Thaddeus comes up and he tells Johnny that that was sensational, and he says that the fans loved it, and no wonder it beats the daylights out of any drag race I ever seen. But that's too big for just a once a year attraction. And then he says, proceeds to lay it on about, we got to have it weekly. Yes, sirree, people will come around, miles around to see you perform. And then the last panel is, well, Wyatt, appears your old school chum about to become a showman. And Wyatt says, I hope he can stand the excitement. So that's the inside of Fantastic Four issue 192. That is my off-the-rack copy. I paid 35 cents for it in tax. That was my third copy of when I got back into the comics that I had bought, and I wasn't so impressed at first because I was. This was my first exposure to a solo story of the Human Torch, and I was just 14, 15 years old, so. But yeah, I was not all that impressed with it. But it was okay for what it was. And I still, going back and revisiting it, it's fun to go back and revisit. So, that concludes another In the Book video. And this is Liking the Covers. With this, get a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Also, comment and subscribe if you like. So until next time, when I have another special, or it will be Fantastic Four issue 193, or a special and that one. I haven't decided yet. So until next time, I hope you come back and check out In the Book. Until next time, peace.